The rain fell softly, like the quiet breath of the night. At 2 a.m., the city had shed its usual glamour, stripped bare into something colder, quieter, and achingly real. Along a stone path cutting through a small park, the streetlights cast faint yellow streaks that shimmered across the wet pavement. Footsteps were rare now. Only the sound of falling rain and the occasional echo remained. Sophie pulled her thin coat tighter, one hand wrapped around a still warm paper cup of coffee. Her shift at the cafe had just ended, but she didn't have enough for a cab this time, so she walked, cutting through the park to save a few dollars, trading warmth for distance. The rain wasn't heavy, just enough to slick her hair against her forehead and darken her shoulders. As she passed the row of familiar benches, Sophie froze. One wasn't empty. A man sat there motionless, soaked in a black suit, head bowed. Rain dripped from his hair onto his collar, like sorrow etched into fabric. He didn't move. He looked like a statue sculpted from grief. Sophie nearly kept walking, but something, maybe the loneliness radiating from him, made her stop. She turned back, stepped closer, and placed her coffee beside him. "It's not hot anymore," she said, "but it's better than rainwater." Then she walked away. His voice caught the air behind her, low and rough like it had been scraped by the storm. "I didn't think strangers could be this kind." She didn't turn. People you know usually don't have to be, and she kept walking. The next morning, the city remained wrapped in gray. The air was still damp from the night's rain. The cafe where Sophie worked opened early, just like always. No one knew she had gotten home close to 3 a.m., shoes soaked, coat chilled to the bone. But something inside her felt a little lighter. Not because she had helped a stranger, but because of his eyes. When she left, they no longer held despair, only stillness. Sophie was wiping down the counter, trying to fight off the fatigue when the door opened. A gust of cold wind slipped in with the soft chime of the bell. She looked up. It was him. Gone was the soaked suit, the face that had once looked like it had forgotten how to hope. Now, Daniel stood there in a worn, button-down shirt and faded jeans, his hair still damp from the morning mist. His eyes were red, but sober, and in them was a quiet strength. Someone who had walked through pain and kept walking. Sophie stepped out from behind the counter. "Can I help you?" she asked, though she already knew he wasn't there for the coffee. "My name's Daniel," he said, voice hoarse. "I'm looking for a job, anything physical. I'll do whatever's needed." The cafe owner, a stern, middle-aged man, shook his head immediately. "No ID, no paperwork, no hire." Daniel didn't argue. He simply lowered his head, gripping the strap of his old canvas bag. Sophie saw it then, not pity, but something quieter, recognition. She had worn that same look when she first arrived in the city, broke, rejected, and alone. "He has nothing," Sophie said firmly, "so he'll work twice as hard as someone who has everything." The owner looked at her, then at Daniel. Finally, he gave a reluctant nod. "Trial, no pay, 1 week." Daniel bowed his head slightly. "Thank you." In the days that followed, Daniel stayed mostly silent. He came early, left late, and took on the dirtiest jobs, heavy, dull, and messy, the ones no one else wanted. He moved like someone serving a quiet sentence. He never asked for breaks, never complained. Every day was the same rhythm, water running, dishes clinking, his footsteps echoing in the quiet corners of the cafe. One late evening, the rain returned. The cafe was nearly empty, washed in soft yellow light. In the back kitchen, Sophie sat slouched at a metal table, arms wrapped around a cup of cold tea. Her eyes were shut, but she wasn't asleep. Daniel passed by, then came back. He poured a cup of warm ginger water, set it gently in front of her, then sat across the table. Neither of them spoke. "Why do you wash dishes?" she asked. Not out of curiosity, but more like a quiet question at the end of a long day. Daniel looked at the small candle flickering between them. His voice was low, steady, nearly a whisper. "Because I'm not as clean as I used to be?" Sophie opened her eyes. No surprise, no judgment. She simply nodded as if she'd known the answer before asking. My mom died when I was 13, she said after a pause. My dad left with another woman. I survived by washing plates, wiping tables, and learning not to trust anyone. For the first time, Daniel looked at her, really looked. His gaze didn't drift. And in the silence, something unspoken passed between them. Not pity, just the quiet understanding of two people who carry different versions of the same bruise. Since that night, something had quietly begun to grow between Sophie and Daniel. Not clearly, not quickly, but gently, like morning light through a fogged window. Daniel still didn't speak much, but his actions were full of quiet intention. He folded towels with perfect care, scrubbed glasses until they sparkled. Each morning, Sophie would find a cup of mint tea waiting for her, always placed in the same spot, always just right, though she'd never asked for it. On slower days, they sat behind the counter sharing half a leftover sandwich, or said nothing at all. Daniel would read the old paperback Sophie had forgotten in the back room. She would close her eyes and let the ceiling fan hum lull her thoughts, the scent of cinnamon and baked waffles drifting through the air. One evening, the sky turned suddenly gray, and rain began to fall without warning. As Sophie gathered her things, Daniel appeared beside her, holding out her coat. She had hung it earlier and forgotten about it in the rush to close. He handed it to her, then quietly opened an umbrella. He didn't speak, just tilted his head slightly toward the door, an unspoken invitation. Sophie paused, then followed him out. Under the small umbrella, they walked side by side. Her shoulder brushed his sleeve, his shirt warm and faintly scented of the rain. The drizzle fell steadily, matching their footsteps. They said nothing, but in that silence, something real was beginning to take root. For the first time, she wished the walk home would never end. It was a busy Saturday afternoon. Sunlight spilled through the windows, blotting the tiled floor like unfinished ink. The cafe buzzed. Laughter, the grinding of espresso machines, the sharp click of heels on stone. Just another day. A group of women entered. They weren't regulars. Their perfume overpowered the scent of coffee. Their handbags shimmered. Their half-smiles shifted the air in the room. Sophie greeted them as always, politely, evenly. But behind the counter, Daniel quietly stepped back, turning his face away. One of the women, blonde hair, red lips, curled to perfection, tilted her head and stared. Then she pulled out her phone. "Oh my God, is that Daniel Hayes? The guy who got left at the altar?" Another leaned in, squinting. "No way. What's he doing wiping tables in a place like this?" A click. A caption. A photo uploaded. Heartbroken heir turned barista. This city never runs out of twisted fairy tales. Within 10 minutes, the post spread like wildfire. Social media erupted. Comments poured in. Confirmations followed. Yes, it was Daniel Hayes. His face hadn't left the headlines in weeks, and now, here he was, washing glasses in a tiny cafe. Sophie hadn't checked her phone. A coworker handed it to her during a lull. One glance. That was all she needed. Daniel, the man who brewed her ginger tea when she was too tired to move, who held the umbrella over her on rainy walks, who once whispered, "I'm not as clean as I used to be," was actually the heir to the Hayes financial empire. She looked up. Daniel stood behind the counter, hands clutching a dish towel, eyes fixed on the floor, pretending not to hear, but she knew he had. Sophie didn't react. Didn't ask. Didn't confront. She turned back to the customers, smiled when expected, nodded when required, as if her entire world hadn't just shifted. That night, after closing, she quietly folded her apron. Daniel entered the back kitchen, silent. "I should have told you sooner," he said gently. "I didn't mean to lie, I just needed to disappear, and you were the only part I didn't expect." She turned. Her eyes were calm, but cold. "You said you weren't clean because of your past," she said slowly. "I understood that. What I don't understand is, when I finally started to trust you, why didn't you trust me back?" He stepped forward. She raised her hand. "I don't need an apology. I'm not angry because you're Daniel Hayes. I'm just sad that the person I opened up to chose to hide behind a name that wasn't real. She placed the apron on the table, gently, like setting down a final goodbye, then turned and walked away. The back door didn't slam, but it echoed inside Daniel like a door closing on the last chance he didn't know how to keep. The buzz from the cafe photo hadn't even faded when another storm broke. This one with a familiar name, Camilla Rhodes. 3 days after Sophie disappeared, Daniel's office, perched atop a glass tower, had an unexpected visitor. No appointment, no call, but Camilla walked in, confident, poised, as if she'd never known what it felt like to be left at the altar. Daniel was reviewing a report. Didn't look up. "I don't take walk-ins." "I'm not a guest," Camilla replied, her voice smooth as silk. "I was your fiancé, remember?" Daniel set the folder down. In his eyes there was only recognition. No anger, no longing. I remember you walking away like you never planned to come back." Camilla laughed softly and sat down without being asked. Her eyes moved across the room, the sleek black desk, the antique clock, the late afternoon light painting the glass walls. Everything remained untouched. Except her. "Marcus wasn't who I thought," she said evenly. "I was deceived. The man I should have married was you." Daniel didn't flinch. After a beat, a quiet smile curved his lips. "You think I regret letting you go?" Camilla tilted her head. "I didn't come to apologize." "Good," Daniel said coolly, "because I'm no longer standing at the altar waiting for anyone." The air stilled, but Camilla didn't back down. She pulled out her phone and placed it on the desk. On the screen, a photo, Daniel and Sophie in the cafe. The way he looked at her said everything. "She got to you," Camilla said softly. "But I've got the photo, the story, the media. If you don't come back to me, even just publicly, she goes down with you. The cafe girl who conned a billionaire? This world eats that up." Daniel's hand curled into a fist, a vein pulsed at his neck, not from fear, but from restraint. "You always knew how to weaponize what you had," he said. "And you always knew how to lose the ones who saw it," she shot back. Camilla stood, sharp as glass. "Think carefully, Daniel. Once I start, I don't stop." The door clicked shut behind her. This time, no one needed to close it for her. Daniel stood still by the window. The city lights below glimmered, but inside him, the storm had already begun. 3 days after her confrontation with Daniel, Camilla stepped into another office, just as high but far colder, the private suite of Ethan Langford, renowned tech investor and her current business partner. Ethan was already seated, dressed in a navy suit, thin-rimmed glasses reflecting the dim light. Camilla didn't need his eyes. She needed his signature. "I finalized the PR team," she said, placing a folder on the desk. "Here's the proposed partnership between Rhodes Holdings and Langford Group. I'm contributing shares." Ethan raised a hand, cutting her off. "I know. No need to repeat it." Camilla paused, then offered a calm smile. "Then let's sign." He flipped through a few pages and nodded. "Fine, but I want you to sign this part first." He slid over a different stack, a transfer of ownership agreement for 30% of the joint project. Without hesitation, she signed. In her mind, she still held the upper hand, with charm, strategy, and secrets she carried about Daniel. She lifted a glass of red wine and smiled. "To us, the ones the media never dares to doubt." Ethan raised his glass too, but didn't clink it. He simply sipped, quiet and cold. Camilla narrowed her eyes. "What, not happy I came back?" Ethan set his glass down, pressed a remote. A screen lit up behind him, playing audio, Camilla's voice recorded days earlier. "If you don't come back to me, she goes down with you. I have the photo, the story, and the contacts." The clip ended. Ethan folded his arms. His gaze no longer held warmth. "I'm not surprised you came back, just surprised you still think you control everything." Before she could speak, he laid another folder on the desk, a court order freezing Rhodes Holdings accounts under suspicion of money laundering. Camilla shot to her feet. "What the hell are you doing?" Ethan's smile was razor thin. You thought I was the buyer. I'm not. I'm the seller, selling greed, and you just paid far too high a price. A month had passed since Camilla walked out of Ethan's office, empty-handed. The media eventually quieted, but not everything returned to what it once was. Sophie had left the city. No one knew. No one asked. Daniel only found out from a book order receipt. Her name was listed as the recipient. The note read, "Morning shift manager, available after 9 a.m." He didn't call, didn't write. He simply stepped away from everything, resigned from the board, sold off part of his shares, cut PR ties, and left. The road to the seaside town was quiet, winding. No traffic, no crowds, only waves crashing gently, the scent of salt, and the kind of air that feels like an unspoken apology. The bookstore sat at the end of a cobblestone street, its pale blue paint faded from the sea breeze. A wooden sign carved by hand read simply, "Second Chapter." That morning, Sophie opened the shop like always. Sunlight spilled through after a night of light rain. She dusted covers, rearranged books, little rituals that had become her calm. The wind chimes stirred softly. She looked up and froze. Daniel stood there, no suit, no luxury watch, just a man in a worn canvas jacket and faded jeans. In one hand, a bouquet of wild daisies, the flowers, she once said, were cheap, but the strongest. In the other, a familiar paper coffee cup, just how she liked it, not too strong, with a twist of dried orange peel. He didn't step inside, didn't speak, he just looked at her. With no armor, no pride, only quiet sincerity. Sophie walked to the counter, opened a drawer, and pulled out a weathered notebook. Its cover was faded, the pages soft with time. She placed it in front of him gently, like laying a flower on a resting place. On the cover, written by hand, "Leave your trust, reclaim what was never lost." A week later, the country's most watched talk show aired a live special featuring a long-anticipated guest, Daniel Hayes. The stage was simple, 2 chairs facing each other, a wooden floor, and a soft LED backdrop that displayed just one line, "When kindness finds the right heart." Daniel arrived on time, no suit, no tie. Gone was the polished CEO persona, just a man in a pale gray shirt and scuffed leather shoes. The host smiled gently. "Thank you for being here. Honestly, we didn't think you'd say yes." Daniel nodded, his eyes not searching the camera, but looking through it, past it. The first question came directly. "You were once at the center of a media frenzy. Then you disappeared. Now you're back, but as someone completely different. Why hide who you were from the start? Was it some kind of test?" Daniel sat up straight, eyes steady, no deflection. "I wasn't testing anyone," he said slowly. "I just didn't want to keep living as a name measured by job titles or account balances." A pause. The host continued. "And the woman, the one who made you stay at that cafe, who was she in your journey?" Daniel gave a small, genuine smile. "She didn't save me. She just placed down a cup of coffee, no questions, no expectations. And through that, I realized there are still people who believe in kindness, not because of the name I carried, but because of how I showed up." The question everyone had been waiting for finally came. "So, are the two of you still together?" Daniel paused. His gaze didn't meet the camera. It drifted somewhere far beyond it, to a place only he could see. "I won't answer for the present," he said softly. "I just know that every morning I wake up a little earlier, make a cup of coffee, and hope to see that smile walk through the door." The host didn't press further. She understood some stories deserve to stop at the edge of a door left slightly ajar. As the camera slowly panned out and the stage lights began to dim, it caught one quiet detail from the audience seats. A single paper coffee cup, the same kind used at the old cafe. No one knew who placed it. No one confirmed anything. But the audience, they knew. Or maybe they just wanted to believe she was still watching. Because sometimes love doesn't need to walk beside you. It just needs to know that somewhere out there, someone still hasn't let go of hope.